What's going on, guys? Still here. And today we have some pretty interesting news regarding the roadmap in War Thunder, primarily the restructuring and foldering of many vehicles in the tech trees for both air and ground. Nothing in naval. Of course, naval isn't relevant. Now, I will link the development post in the description below, so please check that out. There's a lot of stuff to read there. Primarily, one of the things is vehicles that are foldered will have a kind of 50% reduction in research cost, which is pretty interesting, but that part of the post isn't really the focus for the video today. I do want to focus on the ground vehicle changes, mainly the most notable ones, as well as a few WTF kind of ones where it doesn't really make sense why they did the foldering of those specific vehicles, but you'll see what I mean when I get around to it. And I just want to give you my opinions, of course, on the changes. Before we get into nation specifics, I just want to mention that all rank 1s will require only the rank 1 vehicles to be researched to unlock rank 2, but do not require the specific rank 1 of a line to progress to the rank 2 of a line. They're completely untied to all rank 2s. That's honestly amazing, first of all, because rank 1 is super easy to grind through starting out, and it also allows new players to just kind of go for whatever they feel like first, rather than having to play extra tier 1 matches in order to go specifically for a TD or a medium tank or whatever. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump right into the specific nation changes that I wanted to point out. Starting out with US mid-tier, we have one very noticeable change, which is the M18, and this goes for all tech trees, not just the Americans. The M18 is moved to the light tank line, and in the American tech tree specifically, it is before the Bulldog, which is pretty good. Ever since they changed the M18 from a TD to a light tank, it kind of made more sense to throw it there, although personally I still think the M18 is a tank destroyer. In real life it was a tank destroyer, but hey, it fills a gap that is kind of necessary. It works. It's close enough to being essentially a lower tier Bulldog that is more susceptible to aircraft being straight up open top, as well as having worse turret traverse. Moving on to our first foldered vehicle of the day, it's the M6 and the T1 Heavies. Literally the only difference is the T1 having better reverse gear, as well as the armor casting, whether it's cast versus, I believe it's rolled homogeneous armor on the M6. The second foldering, which I initially did not notice, is the M4A276 and the M4A376 are foldered. These icons were a little confusing, but I'm glad I caught it. But yeah, those are foldered as well. Another notable fold here is the M4T26, the Sherman with the Pershing turret, is foldered with the T25, the T25 being the foldered vehicle. Now, I don't really know why both of these are foldered. They are kind of oddities to the tech tree, one essentially just being an upgunned Sherman, while the other being a downgraded armored Pershing. So I guess it kind of makes sense, but it's just weird to me. The next foldered vehicles are the T26E5, known as the Jumbo Pershing, and the T26E1 Super Pershing, the Super Pershing being the foldered vehicle, of course. And honestly, this is probably a really good change. The Super Pershing, all the spaced armor is just terrible. It doesn't work right. And the Jumbo Pershing is just by far the superior vehicle. Moving on to vehicle shifts in rank 4, we have notably the M46 Patton being moved from a rank 5 down to a rank 4. I don't know what its battle rating is going to be changed to. I'm assuming it's going to stay what it is currently. The M56 Scorpion and the M50 Ontos were moved to the tank destroyer line as well. This makes a lot of sense, honestly. Both are more fundamentally tank destroyers than they are light tanks. Moving on to high tier US. Our first folder is the M48 and M47. I'm pretty sure prior to this change, the M48 was actually folded with the M60. Not the craziest change, of course, but I'm just glad that it is out of the way regardless. And on to our next set of patents, the M60A1 AOS and the M60A1 Rise were also folded. Again, this just saves you on some RP. Honestly, the AOS is kind of mid because it's an M60. The Rise gets Sabo, but M735 really isn't the best round. So it's just another RP sink that you don't have to deal with anymore. And finally, the last vehicle folder for the United States is the M1A1 and the M1IP, or IPM1 if you call it that. That's actually kind of nice. The IPM1 being stacked behind the M1A1 means that you can choose to research the IPM1 if you want the faster reload with M900, or you can just have a 120 equipped Abrams. Honestly, it really depends on the person, but I think it's a nice change either way. And we do have a few vehicle shifts. The M3A3 Bradley was moved up to rank 7 and placed just in front of the HSTVL, which it's the same thing, just moved rank. As well as the M1A1HC was moved after the M60A3 TTS. So honestly, not bad. That means you can get 2 120 equipped Abrams a lot earlier than you could before. Not the most radical of changes that we'll be getting into, but it's good enough. Now, moving on to Germany. This is where the changes get really weird. We have a few kind of normal ones, which is the Panzer IV F2 and G getting put together, the Panzer III L and M getting put together, and the Panzer IV H and J getting put together. Literally the difference being that some of them can put track armor on or have side skirts. They basically perform the exact same. However, if we look at the German tank destroyer line, you'll notice that there are 2 missing Stug 3s as well as the Hetzer. For some reason, Gaijin decided to propose that the 42G and the Stug 3L get foldered behind the Marder 3H. Now, I don't know why they didn't decide to just take the 42G and folder it within the Dicker Max on the other side of the tree, or leave it independent and put the Stug 3L within foldered of the Stug 3G, similar to how they had just done it with the Panzer III LM and the Panzer IV H and J. This is where it gets weird, guys. This is what I was saying. Not to mention that the Hetzer has been foldered behind the Jagdpanzer IV. For what reason, I have no idea. I feel like the Hetzer is a very fun vehicle. It's kind of a meme, especially from its days in World of Tanks, and it probably should have just stayed an independent vehicle, but I guess if they're trying to save you a little research progress, it is what it is, and to each their own, and if you want the Hetzer, research the Hetzer. Arguably, I guess you could say the Jagdpanzer IV at its current battle rating is still technically better. Now, moving on to the other side of the tech tree, where the Sturry Mill and the Flak Bus, or Flak 37 as it's called, have been foldered, as well as the Nashorn and Waffenträger have been foldered. It's nice that it saves you on a little bit of a grind, but this is where my opinions of how the tech tree should be restructured, as well as eventually we'll get to Britain a little bit, need to come into play. Honestly, I think Gaijin, while at the same time they're trying to reduce the grind, should honestly take those 4 tank destroyers and put them in the actual tank destroyer line and put a couple of light tanks in the actual German light tank line. It's very weird to me, and I understand they're trying to spread out the research, but maybe they should just go ahead and folder like all 4 vehicles, or make them at least not attached to each other in the TD line, in order to actually just organize the tree a little bit more. It's very, very weird to me. Moving on to rank 4 Germany, we have all 3 of the later Panthers being completely foldered. The A, the G, and the F. As well as the Ferdinand and the Jagdtiger getting foldered. Again, saves you some grind, but if you want to go for the Jagdtiger, hey, I can't stop you. Now, moving on to the real doozy, which is high-tier Germany. First of all, the Martyrs have different folders. The Martyr has the BMP-1 foldered behind it. The Martyr 1A3 has the DF-105 foldered behind it. And this doesn't make sense to me because I'm pretty sure both Martyrs are the exact same battle rating, or one is 7.7, one is 8.0. There's virtually no difference at this point, except for some ammunition choices with the 20 mil, and I think the Milan is a different Milan. I'm not sure. Personally, I think the BMP-1 should be a standalone, the Martyrs should be foldered, the TAM and the DF-105 should be foldered, and the Jagdpanzer could be independent right before the Bagel Panzer. Or even the DF-105 and the Jagdpanzer could be foldered instead, because they're both kind of basically French-like autoloaders, kind of, sort of. So, I don't know. The entire light tank line is really weird. As well as the Radwagen and the TAM-2C being foldered. I guess those kind of make sense, though, because one is more of a mobility and one is more of a real firepower, given it has DM63. But hey, that one's just kind of up to debate, really. Another really weird foldering is the M48 Super being foldered behind the KPZ-70. I feel like you could have easily gotten away with it being foldered with the M48A2G, given that its battle rating is 9.0 or 9.3, and so is the KPZ-70. So you could research that and then research the KPZ-70, and you have two vehicles within the same lineup. I don't know, it's just kind of a weird thing to me. But we also have the Ocelot and the Gepard 1A2 being foldered, which kind of makes sense because do you want to continue on to the Roland and the Flak Rack Rad, or do you want to do a side grade upgrade, which is get guns with your stingers? Of course, the trade-off between the Ocelot and the Gepard 1A2 is that the Gepard, while it has guns and stingers, you only get the first 4 set of stingers, you don't get a reload, while the Ocelot gets, of course, a whole extra set of missiles. Now, our last folder is the Leopard 2A5 and the Leopard 2A6. I feel like that's kind of a given. I don't really think they needed to be foldered, though, but this is where the conspiracy comes in that we're going to have rank 8 really soon, or at least more rank 7s added, and essentially the A6 will be foldered because of a Leopard 2A7. Makes sense, so I can kind of see why. It would also make sense why the M1A1HC was in a different line, and later on when we get to China, the WZ1001E got put after the CM11 for, I would assume, the same reason, or at least for the new upcoming MBT 2000 would be put in that line between the CM11 and the WZ1001 as well. Now, our most notable tech tree shifts would be the Puma being placed all the way at the end of the light tank line in rank 7, and the Weasel 1A2 being placed all the way at the end of the tank destroyer line in rank 7. Now, before we move on, I want to ask you guys a favor, and that would be for you to drop a like, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you can receive notifications about more videos in the future. Now, for starting off with the Russians, I'll just point out a little nitpick that I have, which is the KV-85 didn't get foldered with the IS-1, but got foldered with the KV-1 ZIS-5 instead. Just kind of a weird thing to me, given that they're both the first 85mm heavy tanks in the tech tree, and I figured maybe they would want to put the IS-1 behind the KV-85, given that, well, you're essentially just researching a slightly better hull. Just a weird nitpick of mine, personally. Now, I don't know if this is some sort of mistake, but the SU-85 has been placed foldered in between the SU and ISU-152. The SU-85M has the ISU-122 foldered behind it, and the ISU-122S and SU-100 are foldered. I really don't know what's going on there. It must just be down to the rank of the SU-100 and the ISU-122S. I feel like the SU-85 and 85M should be foldered, the SU-152 and ISU-152 should be foldered, and both of the ISU-122 should be foldered. Maybe the SU-100 could be folded with the SU-100P and it'd be swapped around. I don't know. It's just a really, really weird change to me. It doesn't really seem to make any logical sense, but hey, there's no reason to grind any of those vehicles pretty much anyways. Now, moving on to Russia high tier, not much has changed other than the BMP-1 and the Object 906 have been foldered, the BMP-2 and the Object 685 have been foldered, and the BMP-3 as well as the 2S25, the first Sprut, has been foldered, while the 2S25M still remains a rank 7. I was honestly expecting them to like stack the Object 435 or T64 together or some weird thing like that. But honestly, I guess that's fine. Russia still has a lot of vehicles to research through in rank 6. But all the light tanks getting foldered is quite nice, considering that, I mean, I want the later Sprut. I want the 2S25M, not the first one, really. I would rather have that. I would rather not research the 685 as well, because it's kind of a boring vehicle, although I've heard mixed reviews about it. The one vehicle I will say you should definitely get is the Object 906. That thing spaded is amazing. It is arguably still one of the best light tanks in the game. Its reload simply just cannot be beat, unless you have an autocannon, of course. But besides that point, it has a 4.3 second autoloader. It has plenty of shells in that autoloader. It gets heat FS as well. It gets an APHE round that slaps. It is the one vehicle that, while foldered, you definitely should get. Alright, moving on to the United Kingdom. The main thing here I want to say for mid-tier is that the Comet was foldered behind the Challenger. Kind of a weird thing, but the Challenger is technically a better Comet, given the Turtreverse, and I think it has a better reload. But they're foldered. I would just get them both anyways. The Eistervark and the Crusader were also foldered, so you don't need to have the shitty-ass Crusader. That thing sucks. Just get the Eistervark and the Bosvark and meme around with those. Now, I'm pausing the background footage for a minute because I want to go over the UK high tier very specifically. First off, the Tortoise and Conway got folded, which is nice because the Conway kind of sucks. If you get a Tortoise and you spade it, it's actually kind of a memey vehicle, and the hull traverse rate when spaded is actually really good. The G6 and the Elan got folded, which an artillery piece and a kind of crabby light tank, really no skin off my back. The Carnarvon and the Conqueror, that's a decent fold because the Carnarvon is arguably tier for tier slightly better than the Conqueror, but to each his own. I think the Conqueror is an awesome looking vehicle anyways. Now we get into the real meat of the changes here for the UK. The UK tree is just really screwed up, man. The Marksman and the ZA-35 were folded, which means if you want to get the mobility, you have to research the folded vehicle. The only real good changes of rank 6 are the Roycots being folded with the Oliphant, which is nice because it means you don't have to deal with Centurions that are getting punched by a higher weight class in them, because those two Oliphants just suck. The Roycots are pretty good. However, the Warrior and the Rattel with the Ingwe missiles got folded. This is where it gets stupid. In my personal opinion, I think the VFM5, the Warrior, and both Roycats should be put on the left side of the tech tree in their own light tank line. I know they had the whole South African, specifically tech tree, but they kind of screwed that up with the Ingwe ZA-35, or Rattel, sorry. All four of these vehicles should be in their own light tank line at this point. It's just stupid where they're placed in the tech tree. Now, of course, for all the challengers, as you can tell, you only need to research 3 challengers in order to get to the end of the line. Of course, for the challengers, I would recommend speeding through the first Challenger Mark II, the Challenger 2, to get the Black Knight and the Challenger 2E, because those have the best rounds in the game for Britain, as well as being kind of the most mobile. They may not be the most protected, but let's be honest, when did the Dorchester armor really work at all? Besides maybe helicopter spam every once in a while, you might have gotten lucky, or there was subpar rounds. I mean, realistically, has the Challenger ever been benefited by having all that extra crap weighing you down? Now, finally, this video's coming around 17-ish minutes now. We can get to the rest of the minor nations, starting off with Japan. The Type 60 SPG and the Type 60 ATM were folded. The STA-3 was folded behind the Type 61, although I'd recommend getting it anyways for the lineup. The Type 74 was folded behind the STB-1, the Type 74C specifically. The other 2 Type 74s were also folded. The Type 87 and the Type 89 were folded. The RCV and the 89 are honestly both pretty damn good, so I would just research them both anyways. And finally, the Type 90s were folded. Well, it saves you some copy and paste, but for the lineup at top tier Japan, I would get both of them anyways. Next up is the Chinese tech tree. While they had a few changes to their mid and low tier American equipment, similar to how it was in the other tech trees that share that equipment, the main focus for the Chinese tree is at the high tier, where the CM11 now connects to the WZ1001E. I'm assuming because the MBT 2000 is going to go in between the two. The tank destroyer line is a little different though, and I'm not really sure why. For some reason, Gaijin decided that a missile carrier and a gunned tank destroyer had to be folded together twice, instead of just taking the AFT-09 and putting it behind the CM25, and the PTZ-89 being put behind the PTL-02. For France, which I forgot to mention this earlier for the American tree as well, the M4A3-105 got put in the tank destroyer line, the B1 and the Char 2C are folded. The ELC BIS unfortunately is folded behind the CA Lorraine. Personally, I think the ELC BIS, if you can stand with the Heat FS round, is better than the CA Lorraine, because the CA Lorraine has no armor, it's kind of big, and its reload sucks. As for high tier France, the Lorraine 40T and Char 25T, also known as the Batchat 25T, have been folded. The Batchat 25T does not deserve the battle rating it's at, the rank that it's at, or the spot in the tech tree. That vehicle, honestly, is kind of mediocre most of the time. Comparison to the Lorraine 40T, it's not even the same. The AMX-30 B2 and the B2 Brennus were folded. Honestly, playing an unstabilized AMX-30 at the Brennus's battle rating in 2023 just sucks. The AMX-32s are by far a better choice. They're both stabilized, and one even packs a bigger punch with the 120. The Mars 15 and the AMX 13 Hot were folded, which is nice because the Mars 15 spaded with an ace crew is actually a pretty good vehicle. The AMX 13 Hot just kind of sucks, to be honest. After the 6 missiles are spent, you're screwed. The AMX 10 RC, I haven't really played it, but it's been folded with the SK105. So if you want to play the Argentine equivalent of the Austrian vehicle in the German tech tree, you gotta research the AMX 10. The AMX 32s were already folded, but it almost kind of looks like they weren't. It's just weird how the tech tree is organized. Speaking of organized, they finally put the Mephisto in the tank destroyer line. And of course, with the Leclercs, the Leclerc S1 and S2 were folded. The Series 21 is still unfolded, but that's okay because the Series 21 is the only Leclerc to have Commander Thermal. If you play in the CITV view, of course. Now, for those of you that are grinding through this portion of the Italian ground tree, I highly recommend getting the Stug 3G. It has been folded behind the 9053 M41M. As well as picking up the 7546 M43. It's also a pretty damn good vehicle. It is essentially a smaller, sneakier, less mobile by a little bit, Stug 3G with what is basically a slightly worse Panther gun. And if you own the Zrinyi 1, which was a Hungarian event tank, you will have the trifecta of very good tank destroyers for their battle rating. Also for the mid tiers, again, the M18 was moved to the light tank line, although the bread is there for some reason. Probably should get moved. And the Auto Blinda 74 and the Fiat 6614 were folded. Again, it's a situation where if you want to play a good lineup at that battle rating, you're going to need both. For high tier Italy, you will notice that both Centauro 105s have been folded. Both the Ariete and the PSO, I believe, were already folded. But good news, the Dardo Hitfist 30 has been folded behind the Dardo 25. Never get the Hitfist 30 unless you really have nothing better to do, because it is straight up bad. I prefer the fire rate of the 25 on the Dardo a million times over the Hitfist 30's 30 mil. Slightly more penetration does not make up for the lack of fire rate. Now, for mid-tier Sweden, they folded the PVK V75 and the IKV 103. If you want a funny 4.0 Heat FS derp gun, go for the 103, otherwise avoid it. The T-34 and the Panzer IV for Finland were folded, as well as the PT-76 and the Comet. Thank God. You know as well as I do, we all hate grinding copy and paste. Now, as for high-tier Sweden, they took both S-Tanks and hid them behind their respective Centurions for their rank. Rank 5 S-Tank was hidden behind the SGRV 101, while the Rank 6 SGRV 103C was hidden behind the SGRV 104. The CV9030 has been folded with the STRF 9040B, the 9040B being in the folder. The PBV 302, which has the Top Attack ATGM, has been folded behind the UDES 33, although I believe the UDES 33 just received a new missile. I would have to have somebody check me on that. The ASRAD R has been folded behind the LVKV 9040. I honestly have had mixed opinions of that vehicle. It was kind of alright. I don't know how it is now with the missile mechanic changes, but I would honestly just keep using the 9040 with the radar on top of it, because the 40 mil has no tracer until you get to the Ito 90M, because by that time you'll also probably be running around with the 11.0, 11.3 tanks like the CV90 120 and both of the SGRV 122s, which by the way, the PLSS has been folded with the other SGRV 122. Now, last but certainly not least, Oprah Winfrey's favorite tech tree. You get a Magach, and you get a Magach, and you get a Magach. Everybody gets a motherfucking Magach. Thank God they have finally, if you already, sadly, I feel bad for some of you, including myself to an extent, if you haven't already tried just scratching your eyeballs right out of their sockets trying to grind all these Magachs, you will be glad to know that the Magach 3 and the 6 have been folded. The 6A and the 5 have been folded. The 6R, the 6B, and the Hydra have been folded. The 6M and the 6C have been folded. The 6B Gall Batash and the 7C have been folded in their respective ranks. Holy shit. I cannot believe it. It took so long. It should have been honestly standard when the tree came out. It already had way too many Magachs to research. It was ridiculous. It's literally the only reason I got bored of the tech tree and I wasn't already at the Merkava Mark IV. Speaking of Merkavas, the 1 and the 2B have been folded. The Mark IIIs have been folders. The 4 and the 4 LIC have been folded. And last but not least, the Merkava Mark IV-M sits at the top of the tech tree, the crown jewel of the Israeli chariots. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we have made good time. We are just shy of 25 minutes, so I want to wrap this video up, get this rendered, uploaded, and be done for the night. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, please, thank you so much for watching. If you could, share the video, again, drop a like, drop a subscribe, hit the notification bell if you haven't already. I am so glad I'm done with this video. This has taken me all day. All day to get done, because I was trying to have some actual detail in it. Alright, feels good. Gaijin's getting the roadmap together, and this game has a shred of hope. But without further ado, again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'm Steel, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.